It's, that's true. Push it away. It is weird that it's delayed. So when you're watching yourself, it's like, okay, wait. Oh, there we go. That's good. Not distracting at all. Hi, Erin. How are you?
I am doing well. Thank you for having this. I'm curious to learn.
Yeah, thank you for coming.
Mhm. I teach the research class in social work, and I was just talking the other day with my students about, things move so fast. You've got to kind of keep up with what's happening, and I may have some old ideas, so.
Well, thank you. I think you had my daughter. She was she got her MSW last December. Wait,
Oh.
a year. Oh gosh, it's been a year now, over a year and 2 months ago, whatever. Yeah. And that's how, and of course, I think we've seen you in some of the presentations in the past too. So it's great to have you.
Yeah, thank you.
Hello, Meg.
Good morning, everyone.
Hey, Meg. Good to see you too.
Yeah.
Morning.
There's Matt. Stacia.
Okay, perfect.
This is what.
Right there.
It's already there.
What? Okay. Really?
Then
we'll leave it be. Okay, so then does the clicker work then? Try it. We can see the first. Okay, I'm just gonna click and you tell me if it changes. No. Okay, let's do share. It's really weird. Because I'm sure we unshared it.
Oh, we have one.
Oh,
I
that's-
think I changed that.
Yeah. We're gonna get started in just a second. Hi, Lisa.
There. Now try the clicker.
Okay, now let's try it.
No, no, no.
Matt, if you just want to drive, that's fine too. Or Britt.
Yeah, well, I can't get this to go to the next slide at all.
We break it.
You made it.
It's not the blue screen of death, but the black screen is bad too. Ooh, ooh, there we go. Yes, yes. Okay. Okay, now let's try this. Oh, don't touch it now.
No, no,
Wait, what happened?
no, that was me, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Should have control.
Okay, I'll try this. Yes, okay. Woohoo. Thank you. Thank you for being here, Matt.
Yeah, maybe.
Okay, so, hi, everyone. Just so you know, because of the way it's set up in here, I can't see you, but I have the lovely Brittany Davis, who is my partner in crime today. And, Dr. Matt Winslow is in here as well. So between the three of us, hopefully we'll be able to navigate this through. Thank you for coming to our session. Brittany and I are both librarians here at EKU. My main liaison area is the College of Education and Applied Human Sciences. And Britt primarily works with STEM and is there anybody else? STEM and psychology. So she's the liaison for those groups. And what we're going to talk about today is this idea of outdated research notions. As Aaron pointed out a few minutes ago, before some of you may have joined, things change really quickly, especially in terms of research and how students are doing research and where to go to find the right sources and that kind of thing. So we want to give some suggested guidance and resources and also sort of dispel some of those misconceptions related to traditional what we all might think of in terms of traditional research and research practices. So you can see what our goals are for today. We're going to identify outdated notions, but we're also going to make recommendations in regards to updated notions. So we're going to give you suggestions on how to update those parts of the research process that are really maybe outdated, could potentially prove harmful, and not harmful as in bodily harm, but harmful as in not getting our students to where they need to be in terms of the best practices with research. Okay, so first we want to start with a definition. What are outdated notions? So as you can see on the screen, this is guidance that has been provided at some point, maybe even guidance provided in high school, maybe guidance provided when they were first here at EKU. But this guidance that is now guidance or approaches to research or information literacy that's not really appropriate or relevant to today's research in today's digital age. And when we talk about guidance that's harmful, what we're really talking about is maybe potentially setting students up to not complete their tasks or their research in an effective way. Sometimes this prior knowledge that they come to us with in terms of how to do research, where to go for research, research sources, that kind of thing. A lot of that guidance they may have gotten in high school. Again, sometimes they may have even gotten that in some of their classes in various places. But nowadays there are things that are that's just not the way things are done anymore. And so that's kind of what we mean by outdated notions. So now we want to just pause. And we want you all to think about something you were taught, or maybe you have taught about research or information literacy that you think, I'm not sure if this is actually the right way to go about this anymore. So maybe some of you can share that in the chat or just come off mute and let us know what you think.
Lisa Day in the chat says, in the past, .org was considered a reliable domain.
Okay. All right. .org.
I second that. Yeah, the domains and even the open access information that's out there and being able to, I'm not sure how to teach them to know if it's good or not, some of that.
Okay. Okay. Thanks, Aaron. The .org, .com thing, we're going to address that. That is maybe one of the most common things that people were taught. .org is good. Go to those sites. Shirley, I see your name up there. What did you?
That's validity.
Oh,
Same thing, Aaron.
yes, yes. Okay.
Another one, sorry, this is Aaron, as the way we present information in posters and at conferences, that has really changed, I think, from when I was taught how to do those things.
Interesting. Okay. How about Wikipedia? What was the thing we were all taught about Wikipedia? Or maybe we taught students? Anybody? Maybe we're still saying this.
Never used it.
Never use Wikipedia. Wikipedia is bad. No Wikipedia. Yeah, that also is super common. What did Lisa say?
Should you?
Yeah. Exactly. Okay, so those are things that maybe we even, not only we were taught, but maybe we have even taught our students in terms of, you know, approaches to research, things we think about research, sources, where to go, that kind of thing. All right, so we're going to talk first about this outdated notion. Print is more reliable or more authoritative than digital or online sources. Now, as a librarian, we get all kinds of interesting comments from students when they're coming to seek help from us. And I don't know if we hear this as much now as maybe 10 or so years ago, but this was definitely one that students would come to us and say, I can only use a print book. I cannot use an ebook because it's not the same thing. So those kind of things. Now, the quotes that are up on the screen, I want to just note that I've deliberately, although I'm going to out I'm going to out them here in a second. I deliberately left off the names, but these are actually on some very prominent websites. So one university, Center for Teaching and Learning, Yale. Finally, it's worth noting that many internet sources are less reliable than print. Now, that's not completely untrue, but it seems to imply that what you get on the internet is just flat out not reliable. The next one there, print publications with authors and listed sources tend to be reliable because they provide sources which readers can verify. Again, we support verifying what you can find, but it just kind of implies again that those print sources are the most authoritative and reliable. And the last one there, besides internet in general, internet sources are less reliable than print because it's cheap and easy to put information online, not so of print sources. So again, there's some truth in there, but for a student who's reading that, if they're looking at that, that might scare them into just avoiding the internet altogether. And it kind of sends the message that things they find online are bad. So we want to update this concept, this thought, that medium doesn't really or necessarily affect the content. So one of the biggest ones is a thing we see in the library a lot. For research, a print book is not better than an ebook. Ebook just is an electronic format of a book. It doesn't guarantee just because it's an ebook that it's quote unquote good, but because it's in an electronic format doesn't mean it's bad. It's just a different publication format. We also want to emphasize that this could hinder if students are only looking at print information. They could potentially miss finding some really valuable sources because some of them may not be available in print anymore. There's actually some really reputable journals that are, in many cases, they are going away from print and going to all digital. Some things are born digitally. So yeah, those are things to keep in mind. And then medium might make it harder to figure out the format. So in some cases, students, honestly, and I think there's a typo on there, please forgive me for that. Is it a book? Is it a newspaper? Is it a magazine? In some cases, even when they're looking electronically, they have a hard time finding that. So we just want to make sure that we're not communicating to students that always the best is print, because that's not necessarily the case. So the next one we want to talk about, which some of you already referred to, was this idea that domain determines credibility. There's our .com is bad, .org is good. And this is something that has been perpetuated starting in high school. We work a lot with high school students in the dual credit program. We also work with freshmen coming in who are saying, yeah, I was always told .org is good, go to those, don't look at .com sites. So again, you can kind of see the guidance here. If it's a .edu, that means it's a university website. A .org is a sponsor of a nonprofit. So a lot of people are under the impression that a .org is a nonprofit organization, therefore it must be good. And then the idea that students, if you see their students' evaluations stalled at 3 letters, this page is a reliable source, basically because it's a .org. So that's kind of the end of their evaluation. So we want to update this to emphasize that domain does not determine credibility. There are plenty of .com sites, news sites even, that are the New York Times.com. So when you go to I think it's NY Times or New York Times.com, that is one of the most prominent newspapers and sources of information, even beyond the United States or for information in the United States. So many of those reputable news sites are actually .coms. And the truth is that you don't have to be a nonprofit to get a .org. You could buy a domain, pay for a site, and get that .org domain without necessarily being a nonprofit organization. So you can kind of see here some of the different updates and things we want to kind of reinforce when it comes to using domain. And then there's a website called Educating from Misunderstanding that we're going to actually refer to a lot in our presentation. And I think this quote is really important because when students just completely, like tune out a .com site, then they're going to overlook a lot of really valuable sites, namely news organization sites, where they're going to learn a lot of information about their global community. And they may just discount those. We don't want them to just discount those because it's a .com site. All right. So the next one is one that we have to confess here in the library, we were very guilty of this. So the outdated notion that the way you evaluate a website is to sort of follow a checklist, to do what we're calling vertical source evaluation. So you start with the appearance. How does it look? How does this website look? Does it look polished? Does it have ads on it? Those kind of things. Are there links or references? Is there an about section? And then and some of you, I'm ducking my head, who've been here long enough, years ago, even in the library, we taught the CRAP test. And that's an acronym that we referred to, and I think a lot of students actually still know, ducking my head again, that stands for currency, relevance, accuracy, authority, and purpose. So we would sort of teach this in library instruction as sort of an approach to evaluating a source. But we really want to emphasize that, unfortunately, even for us, we had to really learn that that was not enough. That wasn't good enough in terms of evaluating a source. And I like this example that someone gave, checklists don't equal literacy. So this example of, following a recipe versus learning to cook with grandma, you learn by mistakes, you construct knowledge. There's so much more to it than just following a checklist. So to update this, one of the things that we are doing now in our instruction sessions is to approach evaluation of sources through something called lateral reading. We use, if you have instruction for us, especially with younger, freshmen, maybe even sophomores, we talk a lot about using the SIFT approach or lateral reading. They kind of mean the same thing, but instead of just landing on a site and staying there, What we are now teaching and emphasizing, and this is what professional fact checkers do, is we are emphasizing that students need to basically open another tab and start investigating the credibility of what they're finding on that site. So SIFT stands for Stop, Investigate, Find, and Trace. And basically, instead of just assuming when you land on the site, because let's face it, when they go to Google and are looking at sources, they usually look at the first 3 or 4 results. If you're lucky, they go to the first 10, they never go past that, right? But whatever appears at the beginning, it must be correct. But what we're encouraging students to do is to look at what's on the page, investigate it, really dig deep into what is being said or put forth as truth or accurate information. And we are saying, open another tab, maybe even another, and start investigating who is making this claim. Open a new tab, go to Wikipedia. Whoa, I just said it. Let's go to Wikipedia and see if there's a Wikipedia article on that organization or that person. Open another tab. If this claim has been made by an individual, who is that individual? Are they associated with a university, an organization? Are they associated with a political group? So what we're doing is we're encouraging students to approach research using this lateral reading. So you're going across, so you open a new tab, you look for who that source is, you look for that organization, that author, those people. Look to see, is someone else saying the same thing? Can I find another site or multiple sites that are saying the same thing? So that you can not only see that multiple people are making the same claim or are saying this, so you're verifying that, but you're also looking to see, in some cases, can I find a better source? Because this website it's okay, I could probably use this, but I really maybe want to find something that's even better. We're going to share, or somebody will share the links to this presentation, but I want to make sure that if you get a chance, there's a video that we've linked on this slide from the Digital Inquiry Group, and it's all about lateral reading. It's like 3 minutes, 45 seconds or so, and it is a video that we share with lots of students, but it might be one that you could even embed in your own classes and just encourage students before you start using sources. I want you to do this. So this is a site that you could use and link to and even encourage students to look at. Yeah.
Okay, as Stop, Investigate, what do the FCT stand for again?
Which is there? Oh, yes. Oh, sorry. I was like, wait. Stop, Investigate, Find, and Trace. So the F, and I'll just look, I'm quoting, this is the quote, the SIFT method was originated from a man named Mike Caulfield, who's with I'm going to quote and get his exact credentials. He's with the University of Washington's Center for an Informed Public. He's the one that basically created this SIFT approach, and his whole body of work is about teaching educators and students about verifying claims, fact checking. So Stop, Investigate, Find, Trace. And if you just Google SIFT method, you'll see it. It's like one of the first couple of results, and you'll see Mike Caulfield listed there. And I do want to share this quote before I pass this over to Brittany. This was regarding the evaluation of sources. So he says, taking at face value how a .org describes itself, because remember, we used to teach, just stay on the page, look at the about information, is like scrolling through someone's Instagram feed and assuming they lead a charmed life. Would you expect, for example, the International Life Sciences Institute, which is ILSI.org. If you go to their site, do you expect them to come right out and give you the following warnings? You should know that we receive major contributions from PepsiCo, General Foods, Hershey's, Kellogg's, and other giants in the food and beverage industry. So they're not going to necessarily say that in their about pages. You might have to, again, this is where the SIFT method is really helpful. The lateral reading, you open another tab and you dig into who is this organization? You know, what are they about? And that's why it's really important to really do that lateral reading. So I'm going to pass this over to Britt. Thank you.
All right. So outdated notion number 4, research is a linear process. So a lot of times when we are scaffolding research assignments, we get students, you know, thinking about what topic do you want, kind of what is your research question, and we even kind of have them form a thesis statement. And then we kind of guide them along, okay, you've got your ideas, now you need to find your sources, do a little research, look in the databases, do your literature review, that type of thing. And then we have them kind of end with, how are you presenting it? How are you writing about it, speaking about it? And, you know, I think as scholars at Eastern, we do understand that, you know, research is not linear. It's not step by step. But I also understand the teachers, when you have a novice researcher coming in and has never done this before, it's very hard to get them out of this very black and white. I do step A to step B to step C. And so a lot of times we see this again with the thesis statement, where students come to us and they say, I have to find how variable A interacts with variable B with variable C in a very specific way. And a lot of times they've not even really looked into the literature yet. So kind of the updated version of that is going to be that research is not linear, right? Research is a process, it's iterative. You don't just go from step 1 to step 2. Sorry, there we go. I'm fiddling with the remote too much. So we know it does start in general, right? You think about your topic, and then you go kind of see what's already been researched about, where are the research gaps, kind of what's built up to the field that got you interested. And then you kind of go back and say, okay, maybe I need to redo the topic a little bit, right? And then it just kind of goes back and forth between analyzing, updating your thesis. Maybe you need another source, maybe what you initially thought you wanted to research, or the student wanted to research, it's something completely different towards the end, right? The research is a process. Research should kind of have a little bit of a back and forth. And it is a little bit harder, like I mentioned, for the novice researcher to learn this, but I think it's very important for them to understand that research is messy, and for them to understand that they're not failing, quote unquote, failing when they can't find, you know, for us, they come, I can't find a source on this thing. Well, let's take a look at your topic a little bit more and see why that is. That doesn't mean you're failing as a college student. That just means the research is going in a different direction a lot of times, right? So we want to make sure students understand it's a back and forth. If there's a big community when you become a scholar, when you do your research and you publish papers, you don't do research in a vacuum. So that's kind of a way that we look to update that particular notion.
And Shirley said, I think her comment was, we often get stuck in number 4, this idea of kind of you get a topic, you do some research, and then you write. And
Right.
there's none of this like, wait, stop. I might need to go back and change alter my topic or change my approach. So
There's a lot of nuance to it. That's a good, very good point, Shirley. It's easy to get stuck in the kind of middle step there. Especially for a student. Again, they want to have something that's a little more black and white, and research just isn't always productive. So what do we recommend? Again, you know, especially with the library, Cindy talked about, we see a lot of dual credits, we see a lot of like freshmen and English 102. We really recommend, something that we found that helps students is to let them dwell in the exploratory phase. And so in the library, we kind of equate that to background research. Slow down a minute, right? A lot of times they have this very specific thing or this very broad thing that they're looking at, but they don't really know enough about just the background on that topic to even know what to search for when they get in the database. So kind of an example that helps with that is doing the question formulation technique. And so that gives them kind of a method to look at, okay, as a class, this is the topic, this big broad topic. So maybe it's pop culture that everybody is interested in kind of very broadly. And then you kind of break them off into little groups and you have them think about, okay, what about pop culture is something that maybe this group is interested in. You have all these little subtopics, right? So you get them kind of invested in the main idea and let them be the funnel into the more nuanced thing that they want to do, that they want to research, right? The other kind of recommendation that we see is to delay thesis writing or even allow for a very flexible thesis, a working thesis, kind of like a working title, a working thesis. And these are the things I'm interested in. Have the student go and do a little bit of a literature review, let them just kind of play and look and see what's already been done, and then have them do a little reflection, you know, okay, this is what I found, this is why I'm changing my thesis a little bit, and then, you know, kind of circle back through, have them do that a time or two, right? The other thing that I think is very helpful for students is to give them credit for the process. And you can do that a couple of different ways. I've seen a lot of students do research logs where they have kind of columns for what they're doing. So they have, this is my thesis. I found a couple of these sources here and I learned more about my topic and I'm kind of shifting it to a different way. So this is my renewed thesis, my updated thesis, and then they go back again. The other thing that you can do is to kind of help them narrow, you can help narrow the scope of research assignments. So maybe it's in kind of in the way that it's phrased, so we can say, okay, instead of looking at this very, very big thing or this thing that feels overwhelming to the students, we can kind of hone in on, okay, maybe we only want to look at a couple of these things because that's the way the research is leaning. Okay. All right. Don't shoot.
This is tricky.
This is tricky. I'm not throwing the baby out with the bathwater. That's not what we're recommending here. We're not saying that scholarly peer reviewed are bad, right? That's not where we're going with this. If you take a look at a couple of these quotes, I think, you know, once you're kind of enmeshed in academia, this is just what we are used to as scholars and professionals. However, it kind of narrows the ability for students to flex their critical thinking muscles. And what I mean by that is a lot of times the students will look and say, okay, this is in a database, this is scholarly, this is peer reviewed, you know, we teach that this is the gold standard. And while yes, it is good to have sources vetted by experts in that field, it's not a perfect process. It can have a couple of, you know, places where bias creeps in, a couple places where maybe they're not as transparent in the review process as they need to be. You can take a look at this in certain fields where we're having a little bit of a replication crisis. So maybe one study gets pushed through, the peer reviewer said it was good, and then we can't get other researchers in that field to replicate the results. And so that's just, it's more of a nuanced conversation that needs to be happening with students. Like, you still have to use your critical thinking skills, even when you're looking at a scholarly or a peer reviewed article, because that process is not perfect because humans are not perfect, right? So a lot of times what we think about to kind of update that question is we think about teaching to information need. So for example, we have a really big fire and safety program here at Eastern, and their gold standard, quote unquote, is not even a scholarly article most of the time. Most of the time it's a trade journal. It is something that professionals in that field are writing because they've had years of experience actually doing the trade. And so it depends on your need, right? And it depends on the audience that you're speaking to. So again, 9 times out of 10 for those type of professionals, the trade journal. So we look at information need in the context. Let's see here. What else? So I talked a little bit about bias, a little bit about gatekeeping. The journals that churn out the most get the most money, and that creates a problem where you're not hearing voices from journals that are good but do not have the money, the funds, the people to be kind of as widespread. So you're missing a little bit of voice in that scholarly conversation there, which also leads into, you don't have a lot of novelty that way. You really kind of got to dig a little more in your scholarly articles and your fields to get to some of the new research. You really kind of want to talk about like a broader aspect of, you know, peer reviewers typically are not paid. It's part of our P&D. So you can kind of talk a little bit about how that influences what gets published and what does not. And the other big thing I think that really kind of surprises students, especially once they get a lot of the capstones I teach, when I teach them about retraction watch. So they scholarly articles can be retracted. They can be pulled back for bad research. And I think that that's just a concept that's, again, hard for a novice researcher, but needs to be part of that conversation when you're teaching scholarly articles, teaching evaluating information, that yes, there have been articles that have been retracted, that have been removed. There have been folks that have lost their degrees, their jobs. This is important because this is how we push science forward, but that process is not always 100% correct every single time, right? Humans are fallible. That's just part of it. But to emphasize the need for additional evaluation when you are looking at your review articles, when your students are looking at your review articles. Okay. And again, kind of talking about the context, like I said, there are some formats even, we've even looked at that a little bit, where maybe your topic is so new that the field isn't discussing it in the scholarly literature yet, but there are podcasts that are talking about it that have experts that have had years of experience, right? So it's more of a nuanced conversation about, okay, who are you writing to? What do you need to talk about? I haven't been there. And how can we get into a source that matches your information need, as opposed to just sending students to databases and saying, well, if there's no articles on this, it must not be, you know, I must have picked. I think the students come to us a lot and say, I must have picked something that is not good to do, or is not out there, it is on the list. And really the case is that it's just located in a different place. So let's see. We want to hear from you all. We want to talk a little bit about these other outdated notions. We talked a little bit about Wikipedia, so we kind of hit on that a little bit. But there are other things that are a little bit outdated, like Wikipedia is bad, not necessarily the case anymore. I would argue that AI is not bad used in a particular way, used as a tool. We've also heard Google Scholar is bad, search engines are neutral, that type of thing. So we want to kind of hear from you. I'm going to open it up and let you all type or talk, or however you all want to do it in the audience, and see what you all think about the ones that we've got listed.
I think I'm especially curious to, maybe we want to be careful about the AI thing, but I'm curious to see if anyone is discouraging students from going to Google Scholar. And possibly what your conversations are, especially about search engines. Yeah, that's just a neutral platform. You type it in, we all get the same thing when we do a search. I'm just kind of curious, maybe especially about those two. Or you can go there and talk about AI. Okay, they don't want to talk about it. Well, I'll just speak up for just a second. Okay, oh, good, Aaron. Aaron said, I encourage use of AI to build ideas and get a framework together for their writing. Right?
Yeah, I think that's a good use of it as a tool, right? Don't just kind of let them willy-nilly freely in the world of AI. It's a little more complicated than that. I think, especially when they are first beginning to research, and again, looking at that background research portion of it, you can have them, again, use lateral reading, do all that good stuff, and look at, okay, what is just a general overview of this idea, this research topic that I'm interested in? And you can play with the AI a little bit and even kind of get some more scholarly keywords out of an AI. I do that a lot with students that come to me, say I have a history student come to me and they're talking about the Bolsheviks in Russia. And I'm like, this is not my area. I need a little help. I'll have an AI, I'll say, hey, can you just give me an overview? I'll double check that what it's giving me is good, and then I'll say, can you give me some keywords? Maybe that would be helpful for me. And especially with history topics, there's a lot of names, there's a lot of wars, there's a lot of stuff that I would not know otherwise. That is a good springboard. It's a good starting place to get them thinking about, here's kind of what has happened around my topic, and here's how I can funnel it into a keyword that would be useful for me in the database. So I think that's a really good use of an AI tool.
So, Erin also mentioned using, Wikipedia for finding sources. So we, in our library sessions, we talk about, we still say, don't cite Wikipedia
Right.
necessarily,
Right.
but especially for topics you're not really familiar with, or you've basically chosen a topic from a list, that your professor, their professor is given them, and they're just not sure what that is. Wikipedia is a great place to start to give them key figures, key dates, events, and then to also send them to sources that they can then hopefully, sift through and determine, are these sources relevant? Is this connected to my topic, and that kind of thing. And someone asked if we could talk about the search engines or neutral concept.
Yes. So
Do you want to do that?
we can both do that. That's
Okay.
okay. So search engines are not neutral. Search engines are run and based on algorithms. So if I go and search for something about politics current, what I'm gonna get is gonna look vastly different than an undergraduate student, in my opinion. Because it learns. It's not an AI, so I don't want it to be confused with that. But it is gonna pick up on, what links are you clicking on? Are you clicking on more of the Republican links or more of the Democratic links? So when I search again, it's gonna say, oh, she wants the Republican side of it, or oh, she wants the Democratic side of it. And so maybe a student that is in the opposite political party of me is gonna get opposite.
Yeah, and when you put something in, there's three of us in the room, Dr. Winslow could put something in, do a search, and then Britt could do a search, and I could do a search, and in the top 10 results, we may get a few that are similar, but they're not going to always be the same results, because your Google learns from you. So the more you're using your laptop, your phone to do searches, again, it's looking at the patterns. What are you clicking on? What types of sources are you clicking on? What are the things that you frequently search? So it's using all of that data. Yes, the Google is watching you, just like our phones are listening to us. But it's basing it, if we want to like not totally not Google, it's kind of trying to give you what it thinks you want. And so student to student, their searches are not necessarily going to give them the same results, especially the more they're searching on a particular device that's connected to them. Now, if they go and sit at a library computer or a computer they don't use all the time, it's not going to give them the same results as what they get on their phones or their, on their own laptops or tablets or whatever. So when we say search engines are neutral, we don't necessarily mean that it's biased in the sense that, oh, it's, this particular type of news source, but the results are based on what Google is learning about you the more you interact with it. Yeah, so
And that even extends to social media. So for example, my husband and I were looking at the same post, and where Facebook does the top comments now, his top 4 comments were vastly different than the top 4 I saw, just based upon what we click on and based upon the things we interact with. It ranks them, just like Google does.
So tell us, I think there were several other
Yeah.
comments. So after the one about the neutral one.
Yes, so, friend HP says, I don't teach that Google Scholar is bad per se, but I do require that my students who are working in research teams to demonstrate that they have used identical databases across team members. I typically require them to use only EBSCOhost search engine. A main reason is to help them appreciate the relevance of systematic organization and replicability of keyword searches.
And that's true. The thing is, Google Scholar is the thing that I think students love about it, and frankly, I love about it a lot, is that I can use that same plain language that I use in a Google search. I can use, how does, apparel size impact body image? So if that's my research question, I can literally just type it in like that. If I go into a database, I have to think about my research question in concepts. So I would look at apparel size, I would look at body image or body distortion or negative body, I have to think about those, and that's a good thing. And we teach that every day here in the library. And the other thing about Google Scholar is not all of the research. It's not all of the literature. They don't have everything indexed in there. So I don't know if this is good or bad, but many of the things that they may need to get to may not be accessible through Google Scholar, which means there is, it's behind a paywall because they're an EKU student. We pay tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars for our databases. They're not going to see some of that in Google. Plus, the thing about Google Scholar is a lot of that stuff is not freely available, the full text. But the good thing again about Google Scholar is that there are a lot of great sources there. And when you are connecting, if you're on campus, Google Scholar is going to know that you are an EKU person. So you could be a student, faculty, whatever, it's going to know. If you're off campus, what we teach students is you still use the link that we provide, or you set up your own Google Scholar so that it knows you're affiliated with EKU. And that way you're connecting back to those same articles and sources that you would find in a database. So Google Scholar has its purposes, and it's also sometimes great, again, almost as a starting point, because you can put your question in the box and it just knows somehow to pull out those keywords, and it ranks things by relevance based on the order of the words you put into the search box. And it also gives you some date limiters that you can use. It's not great for source types. There are lots of theses and dissertations in there, lots. And so students can easily get confused if they go to Google Scholar and think, oh, scholar equals scholarly article. And my professor said, I have to find 5 scholarly sources. Therefore, this thesis that they don't really know, they don't understand, even though the first page says, this is in completion of the requirements for a thesis at the University of such and such. They just sometimes overlook that. So Google Scholar is not necessarily bad, and we do teach it, but we do try to give some guidance.
Yeah, I teach it. I like what Cindy said. I teach it in conjunction. So I teach it as a Hail Mary. I teach it as, if you are not having luck in the databases, come to Scholar. Once you find something that gets close, open that article up and look at the subject's abstract keyword mine from there. And then you're going to go back into the databases because you're going to have more knowledge about the words you need to use to search in that more structured kind of way.
I just put plug in for Research Rabbit and SciSpace.
Love SciSpace.
These are new things that, don't have some of the features. EBSCO is great because you get full text no matter what. You can get interlibrary load or whatever, you can get to the full text. But SciSpace and Research Rabbit, those new websites are super powerful. Not only in finding sources, but then also they have all that AI capability of summarizing.
Streamlining. Yeah, you
Yeah.
can see quickly at a
So,
glance.
But again, it's user beware. I mean, it's like everything else. It's powerful, but it's also,
It has limitations.
yeah.
And you have to evaluate, just like everything else. You can't just assume, here's a peer-reviewed article. My professor said I had to have a peer-reviewed article. This is going to be the one. You have to evaluate everything. And I'm very biased because I'm a big fan of SciSpace. The thing that I also use with SciSpace is I think it helps students to learn to read a scholarly article, read a peer-reviewed article. It helps, it shows and it models for them, pulling out those key ideas, pulling out the findings, pulling out limitations of research. It models a little teeny tiny bit of synthesis versus summary. And it also is great for modeling a literature review matrix. So any of you that are teaching students to write a literature review, if they have to do it, even if it's a semi-small one, SciSpace is great because it kind of shows, it gives you a visual of what a literature review matrix could look like. So, yeah.
So
Love
a
that.
couple
What
more
else?
more comments from
Yeah.
the chat. One from Shirley, she said the same thing you did. I do use Google Scholar with our graduate students as a last step. That is what they will have access to in their jobs after graduation.
Yes.
Lisa Day says, I don't encourage students to use Google Scholar because I repeatedly find that EKU libraries databases are more likely to provide full text in a way that is easiest for students to cite. Plus, the students pay for university resources with their tuition and fees. Why not use every possible benefit of being a student? And then also, friend HP says, PubMed is also available after graduation. And this is something I also talk about my students with a lot is, EBSCO is gone.
Yes.
Once you graduate, so once you leave here, you don't have access to it anymore. So I'm increasingly trying to get my students to use sources that are going to be available to them after they leave here, because otherwise there's no transfer after they graduate.
Yes, yeah, I'm really glad that you mentioned that, especially about Scholar and PubMed, because again, those are tools they will have access to after EKU. And even if they have to find some means to request it through a public library or whatever, or even coming back to, sometimes you can go on campus, different places. I mean, EKU used to offer this, but there might be ways to access the full text of those, but if you don't have access to library databases, you'll never see it. So if we don't ever talk to them about Google Scholar, they may never see that source. SciSpace is another one. It does refer to sources, but a lot of those sources they're not full text just because of SciSpace. So a lot of those things are still connected. It's going to try to go through our proxy to see, hey, are you connected with EKU? But again, you're seeing the references. You're still seeing some of the literature that you wouldn't normally see once you have no more access to, EBSCO, Sage, ProQuest, all of those sources that we pay for. And I agree, Lisa. I really think there's something to be said about, tuition is not cheap. And so one of the perks of that is that you get access to this huge array of very strong research. And so we want to encourage students to use it. And so in the library, we're doing our best to try to teach them how to get to what they need. So anybody else have any other questions or about this? Okay, so if you want to go on, Britt.
Yeah. All right. So what do you do from here? We told you a little bit about the outdated and the updated notions. So your next kind of steps for that is to take a look at your assignments and kind of run through our examples of how you could maybe update that a little bit. We have a team of librarians here at Eastern. We are more than happy to kind of sit with you and talk about, where your students struggling. A lot of times that's what we find when we sit down with faculty. They'll come to us and say, okay, this is where they're struggling. And we'll say, well, they need to do a little more instruction about the .coms versus the .orgs. We need to do a little more instruction about keywords and how you mine those from, references. So we can sit down with you and help you design that. Reconsider your requirements for students to use scholarly sources, again, depending on, the final product, depending on the topic, depending on what you're really trying to get them to learn from that process. We can definitely sit down with you, sit down with your department and just kind of tag team and talk about, why some of these outdated notions are not really serving students to the best of their ability, because we do want them to have those transferable skills when they leave Eastern. And again, the librarians are here to help you look at your assignments, to help you talk with your colleagues. We want to prepare our students to have these research skills when they go out into the workforce, because they are going to be researching, all kinds of different things. And it may not, again, like Dr. Winslow said, may not be in the databases, but their jobs will require research more than likely in some form or fashion. Okay. Any questions, any takeaways? We're getting close to the end here, I think. Yeah.
Any final thoughts? Thank you guys.
Thank you all.
Thank you for attending and asking good questions and sharing your thoughts throughout, and we look forward to working with you. If you have any more questions, let us know.
Thank you all. Have a good rest of your day.
Right. Close all this down.
Okay.